Imagine this for a moment. A land so wealthy that its fabrics feel like water, its spices are worth gold, its palaces shine brighter than European castles, and its markets overflow with riches that most of the world can only dream of. Now imagine that this land, India, does not fall to an empire through one great invasion, but instead through something far more silent, far more dangerous. It begins with a handshake, not a sword. A trade deal, not an army. A company, not a country. And before anyone realizes what's happening, the richest civilization on Earth is trapped inside the machinery of foreign rule. This is not just history. This is one of the greatest takeovers ever witnessed by humanity. This is the story of how the British Empire took over India. When the British first arrived, India was not weak. In fact, it was the opposite. India was among the most powerful and prosperous regions in the world. The Mughal Empire ruled much of the subcontinent, and Indian industries were unmatched. Indian textiles dominated global trade, Indian agriculture fed millions, and Indian ports were buzzing with commerce. Europe, at this time, was still hungry for spice, silk, cotton, and wealth. That hunger pushed European nations across oceans, searching for ways to control the markets of Asia. The Portuguese came first, then the Dutch and the French. But in the year 1600, Britain entered with a new player, the East India Company. The East India Company was not an army. It wasn't even a government. It was a business corporation created for one purpose: profit. It carried a royal charter, meaning the British Crown granted it the right to trade overseas. But the company's ambition was bigger than trade. It wanted power. Slowly, carefully, it set up trading posts in major Indian cities: Surat, Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. At first, the company behaved like a guest. It paid taxes. It gave gifts to local rulers. It requested permission. And the Mughal emperors allowed it because the British seemed harmless, just another group of foreigners buying and selling goods. But behind the polite smiles and trade agreements was a long-term strategy. The company was studying India. Every court rivalry, every weak alliance, every political crisis, every rebellion. They understood something that most Indian rulers underestimated: that India was not a single unified power anymore. And that cracks were beginning to show. The turning point came after the death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707. The Mughal Empire slowly weakened, and India began to break into regional powers. The Marathas rose in the west. The Nawabs ruled Bengal and Awadh. The Nizam controlled Hyderabad. The Sikhs grew powerful in Punjab. India was still strong, still rich, but increasingly divided. And in that division, the British saw opportunity. Because the company did not need to defeat all of India. It only needed to defeat India in pieces. And that is exactly what it did. The first major breakthrough came in Bengal, one of the wealthiest provinces in India. Bengal was a jewel: fertile land, rich agriculture, thriving crafts, massive tax revenue, and access to global trade routes. Whoever controlled Bengal controlled enormous wealth. The Nawab of Bengal, Suraj-ud-Dowla, was young and fiery and deeply suspicious of British intentions. He noticed that the British were fortifying their trading post in Calcutta as if preparing for war. He demanded they stop. The British refused. Suraj-ud-Dowla attacked and captured Calcutta, imprisoning British soldiers and civilians. This event was later exaggerated by the British into a propaganda tool called the Black Hole of Calcutta, used to justify revenge. The company responded by sending a man named Robert Clive. But Clive did not plan a fair war. He planned a betrayal. In 1757, Clive arranged secret deals with Suraj-ud-Dowla's generals and court insiders, especially Mir Jafar, promising him power if he turned against the Nawab. And then came the Battle of Plassey, one of the most important battles in Indian history. The Nawab's army was larger, stronger on paper, and had home advantage. But his own commanders stood silent on the battlefield. They did not fight. They watched. And the British won, not by military superiority, but by corruption and conspiracy. Suraj-ud-Dowla was defeated and later killed. Mir Jafar became the new Nawab, but he was no king. He was a puppet, placed on the throne by foreigners. And Bengal, India's economic heart, now became the company's money machine. The British looted huge sums of wealth, gained political influence, and most importantly, began collecting taxes. That's when the East India Company transformed completely. It stopped being a trading company and became something terrifying, a private empire with its own army. With Bengal's wealth, the company built one of the strongest armies in Asia. And this army was not British in numbers. It was largely Indian soldiers commanded by British officers. Indians were being used to conquer India. It was genius in strategy and cruel in consequence. Over the next decades, the company expanded across India using a deadly mix of diplomacy, manipulation, and warfare. Whenever Indian rulers fought each other, the British offered help, and that help came with conditions. The company made alliances called subsidiary alliances, where Indian rulers had to maintain British troops in their territory and pay for them, while giving up real independence. This system looked peaceful, but it was a trap. Once British forces were inside a kingdom, control slowly shifted to them. One of the most devastating examples of resistance came from Mysore, ruled by Hyder Ali and later his son Tipu Sultan, one of the fiercest opponents of British. Tipu Sultan modernized his army, built rockets, strengthened administration, and sought alliances with France. He understood the danger earlier than most. He knew the British were not traitors, they were invaders in disguise. Tipu fought 4 major wars against the British. He became a symbol of resistance, feared by British officers. But in 1799, during the siege of Seringapatam, Tipu Sultan was killed. His fall was not just the fall of a ruler, it was the collapse of one of India's strongest barriers against British expansion. The British then turned toward the Marathas, who controlled huge territories and had once challenged the Mughal Empire itself. The Maratha Confederacy was powerful and brave, but internal conflicts weakened them. British diplomacy and military strength slowly destroyed them through a series of Anglo-Maratha wars. By 1818, the Maratha power was crushed, and British influence spread across central and western India. But the company did not always need war. Sometimes it used paperwork as a weapon. One of the coldest and most brutal policies was introduced by Governor-General Lord Dalhousie, the doctrine of lapse. According to this policy, if an Indian ruler died without a biological male heir, the company would annex the kingdom. Adoption, an accepted tradition in Indian royal families, was ignored. Kingdoms like Satara, Nagpur, and Jhansi were taken away legally, not militarily. Families were destroyed without a battlefield. Power was stolen using law. By the mid-1800s, the East India Company controlled most of India. But with control came suffering. Heavy taxation burdened farmers. Landlords were empowered while peasants became trapped in debt. Indian industries collapsed as British machine-made goods flooded the market. Indian textiles, once world famous, were crushed to protect British factories. Millions lost livelihoods. Wealth was drained from India into Britain. India was being turned into a colony whose resources fed the Industrial Revolution in Europe. As the company grew richer, Indians grew poorer. And then the tension exploded. In 1857, India witnessed one of the largest uprisings against British rule, often called the First War of Independence and sometimes called the Sepoy Mutiny. It began among Indian soldiers in the company's army. The immediate spark was the introduction of rifle cartridges rumored to be greased with cow fat and pig fat, an insult to both Hindu and Muslim religious beliefs. But the truth is, the cartridges were only the final insult. The real causes were years of economic exploitation, cultural disrespect, land seizures, and political humiliation. The rebellion spread rapidly. Soldiers in Meerut rose up and marched to Delhi. They declared the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as the symbolic leader of India. Across northern India, people revolted. Kings, queens, peasants, and warriors joined. It was chaos. It was rage. It was the storm that the company feared for decades. For a brief moment, it seemed the British might lose India. But Britain struck back with brutal revenge. The British Army crushed the rebellion through mass executions, village burnings, and extreme punishment. Delhi was devastated. Innocent people were killed. Entire cities were terrorized. By 1858, the rebellion was defeated. The Mughal emperor was exiled. The old Mughal dynasty was ended forever. And now, the East India Company was blamed for the chaos. It was dissolved. But British control did not end. Instead, the British government took direct control of India. This was the beginning of the British Raj. India became a formal colony of the British Crown. Queen Victoria was later declared the Empress of India. The British promised reforms, but the structure remained the same. India was still being drained economically and controlled politically. The British built railways, telegraphs, and modern institutions. But these developments were designed mainly for control. Railways helped move troops quickly. Telegraphs helped suppress rebellion faster. Roads improved transport of raw materials to ports. Administration helped collect taxes more efficiently. Even modern education created a small class of Indians trained to serve colonial systems. Behind the so-called development was exploitation. During British rule, India suffered multiple famines, some so deadly that millions died. In many cases, food was still being exported even as Indians starved. The British justified this with economic policy, but to Indians, it felt like abandonment and cruelty. India's wealth was fueling Britain's empire, while India's people were struggling just to survive. So how did the British Empire take over India? Not through one invasion, but through a long, calculated process. It began with trade. It grew through political interference. It expanded through betrayal. It was strengthened through wars and alliances. It was enforced by economic control. And finally, it was sealed by the collapse of resistance after 1857. The British didn't conquer India like an empire marching across borders. They conquered it like a spider building a web, slowly, patiently, trapping each kingdom until no one could escape. And by the time India realized the full scale of the trap, the web was already everywhere. But the story does not end with conquest. Because even under British rule, India never stopped resisting. The spirit of freedom survived in poetry, culture, protests, and revolutionary movements. From local uprisings to national movements, India continued to fight back until it finally achieved independence in 1947. The British Empire could rule India's land, it could exploit its wealth, but it could not permanently crush the will of its people.